Ya se está conectando. Hey, ay, todavía no. Espérenme, porque dice conectando con el audio.
Primer
Hey,
semestre.
Cara.
Entonces hoy se inician llenando su solicitud,
espérenme.
firmándola, se revisan los...
Ya, perdón. Hey, Cara, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Hi, thank you for meeting with us.
Oh, it's lovely to be here. Sorry, I can only do it in English.
No, it's perfect, but we're so excited to have you here with us. We finished reading your book last week, and we have a lot of questions, Cara.
Yeah.
Let me quickly introduce myself and all of us. My name is Nora Martinez, and my Instagram is Book Lover. We've been together, all of us, or most of us, since 2020, right when the pandemic started. So we've read a lot of books, discussed a lot of books, and we're really happy that we read yours and we discussed yours, and we're really happy that you're here with us today.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
What time is it where you are?
5 o'clock at night.
We were discussing. I was like, no, I think it's like 8, and we were discussing right before you came in, and they were like, no, in England it's like 5, so it's 5.
It's 5.
Thank you. Well, I don't know if it's okay for you. We have several questions, and then at the end, maybe we can have people tell you their comments and ask some questions directly. Is it okay?
Sure, yeah. Whatever works for you.
Thank you. Okay, the first one. We don't generally read thrillers in this book club. I think this was the first one, and we loved it because you were able, in a thriller, which are like books that generally don't have like controversial or deep subjects, you were able in this book to have like a million things we talked about, like from parenting to suicide to depression. I mean, it was like super deep for a thriller. We were like super surprised, and everyone was like, I want to read everything that she wrote. We loved it, and we loved that you were able to do that. Did it come out like that at the beginning, or did you think, okay, I'm gonna write a thriller and then see what happens? Or how was the process of writing this incredible thriller, deep, thoughtful book?
I suppose I always try to look at wider issues when I'm writing a book like this, because I think it's yes, you want to write something that will work as a thriller, and people want to keep turning the pages and find out what happened, because that's humans. We're like that. We're very nosy. We want to know other people's secrets all the time, don't we? So I think that's why we like crime and thriller books, because you find out other people's secrets. But it's also an opportunity to look at other issues, and particularly around the family. I write about families quite a lot, and obviously other people do as well. And I think it's really an interesting way of looking at some of those issues, whether they're big social issues or they're issues within families. I think a thriller or crime book can do that really well, because you're always dealing with people who are in extreme situations. So they've found themselves in a bad place, either because they've made bad decisions themselves, or because other people have made bad decisions, or just bad luck. But then you start to see how, once someone's under pressure, how they react. And that's why I think it's a really interesting place to look at issues around families and relationships, and also bigger issues. I always try to look at bigger issues in all of my books, not just about a family or a one couple or something. I always like to look at wider things as well.
You did it perfectly, because it's just that we were really surprised, because I tend not to put thrillers in the book club because it's always like very straightforward. I mean, how many things can you really deeply discuss in 4 sessions? Because we had 4 sessions to discuss this book. So when I read this one, I was like, okay, this is a thriller that we can really get behind on and really discuss, because it had a lot of interesting subjects. And I mean, you deal with, like you said, big social issues, but also family issues, like, I don't know, the parenting styles of Barry and Sharon that we hated with all our guts. We were like, oh my God, with that woman. And then we hated Barry, and then we hated her again. And it was like a very complicated dynamic. And I don't know how, and I mean, how do you get like inside of their brains to write from that perspective that you really end up hating them?
Yeah, well, I think parenting is really hard.
It is.
And I don't have children, but I mean, I just, from what I observe, I think the other thing that isn't really talked about very much is the whole issue around motherhood, because we have so many assumptions as a society about motherhood and how mothers are supposed to be with their children, and the sacrifices they're supposed to make for their children. But I think some people, like Sharon, are not supposed to be mothers. You know, they just don't have the right qualities
Tools.
or the right personality, because you have to be very selfless. You have to put your child first if you're going to be a good mother. And most people do that, it comes naturally. But for Sharon, it doesn't. She cannot do that. She cannot put her child ahead of herself. And she's not unique. I've seen people like this. I've taken some of Sharon comes from someone I know, and I've watched it. So it does happen. There are people who cannot be the mother that perhaps they want to be. They just
Yeah.
can't. So part of it for me is observation, and partly also just to look at this issue, which is quite taboo. It's quite a sort of forbidden issue to start looking at the idea of motherhood and saying that there are some people who really shouldn't be doing it because they don't have the right qualities. So as you say, it was a really interesting way to look at that issue through a thriller, and see how that played out. And by the end of the book, I think we are a bit more sympathetic to Sharon, because we can see where some of the things came from in her past that made her behave the way she does. But it's not really an excuse, it's an explanation. But again, knowing what we do about her, I think we can say at the end, she shouldn't have been a parent. It wasn't the right route for her to take. She'd have been better staying on her own. So
But
yeah.
it's incredible that you can write about that. And at the end, we were like, when you explained her whole backstory, it was like, okay, we kind of get it now. I mean, you're not like, okay, we forgive you everything, but you're like, we kind of get it now, because that's life, right? I mean, everyone has those kind of stories. Everyone has a backstory. Everyone has things that hurt us, that makes us what we are. And when we understood how alone she felt and how not wanted she felt, well, hurt people hurt people. So that's, I mean,
Exactly.
we kind of right? I love that phrase because it's so true. And let me tell you something that we said in one of the discussions. It was like, okay, we get it. We get why Sharon is how she is. Where's Barry's backstory? We want it.
Yeah, the thing about Barry is, he's basically an idiot. I mean, Barry's he's not really very deep. I mean, Sharon isn't very nice, but she's complicated, and her story is complicated. I don't think Barry is complicated. I think Barry is just a bloke, you know,
Idiot.
just
I love it.
he's an idiot, and he thinks he can get away, and it doesn't matter. No one will find out. No one will give him a hard time. He comes over really badly, but I don't think he's evil. I think he's just stupid. But that's very common.
I know there are a lot of stupid people in this world. But Cara, do you think like at the end I mean, they were not really evil. They were just like bad people and bad parents. Did they deserve what happened to them?
Oh yeah, well, probably not. You see, this is the whole thing about you make one bad decision and then you find yourself in a bad place, and then you make another bad decision in order to try to get out of the bad place. And then then suddenly it's out of your hands, it's out of your control. So I think that was part of what I was looking at there, that they've ended up in a terrible place, but you can't say that they deserved it. They were being played and they didn't even know. You know, they didn't realize what was happening to them, and they still don't at the end. They still don't know what's actually happened. They can't explain why they've ended up where they are because they've been deceived. And you know, so that's what makes the twist, really. And everyone likes a good twist, don't they? Everyone likes a nice twist at the end of a book. And in fact, when I wrote this book, the first thing that came to me was the twist. So I
Wow,
started out,
really?
yeah, I started out with the twist. I started out thinking, okay, so there's a lot of stories written about missing children. You know, there's been hundreds, and you see it on TV. It's very common. And I was thinking, is there another way we could look at this? Is there a different angle on this very common storyline? And then I thought, okay, so what if the child was part of the disappearance? That the child actually made it happen? Then everything would be different. And so that's where I got that idea from. And after that, the challenge was to write a book in which there was a community and a family where this would happen, where the first reaction of the reader would be at the end, oh my God, you know, I can't believe it. But then the second reaction would be, oh yeah, okay, it works, it fits. The character of the child, the nature of the family, this isn't that strange. It's something that's believable. It's within the range of the believable. Though it's a surprise, it's not a cheat. You know, it's not such a strange twist that
It can
you know,
happen.
like yeah, exactly, like aliens or something ridiculous. You know, it's psychologically it holds together. It makes sense. So that was the challenge, to create a family and a community where Daisy making the decisions that she did made sense, and that she was the type of child where you would believe it as well, that she had that character and that intelligence, that she would be able to manipulate somebody into going along with her plan, which she does.
It did. And let me just tell you something. Our first reaction totally was, oh my God. And the second was, what the fuck? That was the second reaction, Cara. It was like, oh my fucking God, what is happening? And you left it at the end. So, I mean, I got a million messages because we divide the book. And then at the end, I'm like, don't tell spoilers. Don't say anything in the WhatsApp group. So I got a million messages like, what the fuck? Am I just reading on the... Sometimes I don't even read the last part. And what is happening? A million messages. So yes, the first was oh my God, and the second, I have to admit, was not the one you said, but was like, what the fuck just happened? I need to read the book again because it's like changes everything.
changes everything. And if you ever do read the book again, if you have the time to read again, you'll pick things up as you go along because you'll know the answer by what's coming. And
Yeah.
so you'll find little tiny things in there that are clues, but they're so small that when you read it the first time, you don't see them, or you probably don't see them. But once you read it a second time, then you'll think, oh my God, there. It's, there's something there. One of the obvious ones is there's the children have put all the things up on the board at school about what they're going to do in the holidays.
Yeah.
And Daisy says she's going to go on a ferry for the first time.
I didn't even
Uh,
pick up that one, and I did read it twice.
yeah, there you go. So she's made a mistake, actually. She shouldn't have said that because actually looking at that, her parents might have thought, well, we're not going on a ferry. What's she talking about? But no one picked it up. She shouldn't have said it, but she did. So there you are. There are little things like that which are fun if you have time to read
Oh,
it again, then they're fun things.
I think I'm gonna have to read it a third time, Cara,
Oh
because I
no.
didn't even pick up that one. Wow. But really, it was a super amazing twist because most of the time, and that's what I was telling them when I was explaining that I wanted a thriller, but this one was different because most of the times you can tell where it's going. I mean, there are little clues, and you know that it's going to be this one, or they're trying to misdirect you. And here it was, I mean, it was just like a character you mentioned in passing. I didn't even when it was like I was like, who the fuck is this person? I mean, I don't know who it is. And then obviously I got it, but it was like, when did she come up? She was like in 3 sentences in the whole book, and she was enmeshed in everything. So it was a really good twist. You really got like a rise out of us, and you really got like the conversation going about why some thrillers are like just to pass the time, and why other thrillers like this one is like you can really have discussion about lots of things, like including motherhood, or another subject that like we discussed a lot is like, are children like Machiavellian? I mean, can they be born like that, or the circumstances make them? Did Sharon make her like that because she didn't love her enough, or what do you think?
I think it's a bit of both. There's this phrase in English which you might know, which is nature and nurture. So nature is how you're born, and you can't change that. But nurture is how you're brought up and your family. And obviously that's something that will be different depending on who you are and where you are. And I think
Yeah.
that both things are really important because doesn't matter what your personality is like in some ways if you're brought up with no love and no support, then you're going to struggle, and on the other hand, if you're a psychopath, it doesn't matter how much love you get as a when you're being brought up, because you're going to be that way. But most people are in the middle. Most people, their lives will change depending on their upbringing, but they will have some characteristics which are in there right from the start and which can't go away. It depends then if they come out or if they don't. They always say that psychopaths aren't always killers. There are a lot of people in business and in politics who are psychopaths, but they get their kicks, they get their satisfaction from a different type of power and a different type of control. Whereas killers don't have that outlet for their psychopathic killers don't have the outlet that the others do, and they
Yeah.
end up committing crimes. So there's a lot more psychopaths out there than you think. There's quite a
We have
lot.
a lot of them here in politics in Mexico, more than you can believe.
There you are.
A
And the
lot
other
of them.
another a little fun thing for you. If you remember the scene where Daisy is with her friend at her friend's house, and they're upstairs and playing together, and Daisy's mum comes to look for her, and Daisy hides from her mother, and her mother's really worried, but Daisy's hiding and won't say that she's there. I remember my editor said to me when I wrote that scene, she said, "Oh no, I don't think an 8-year-old would ever do that. It's not believable." And I said to her, "I did it." exactly
Really?
that as a child. My
Oh
mother
my
came looking
God,
for me.
Cara. And we
So I
discussed
knew it
that
was
scene.
possible.
Oh my God, we discussed that scene because we were like, and really, like a child, an 8-year-old child, like see beyond and like worry their mom just because they're mad or whatever. You just
Yeah,
answered that question.
I know. I think children know more and observe more than we probably realize. And I think girls in particular, when they're younger, it's girls that are like much more aware of their surroundings and aware of the way people are behaving. Well, not so much boys, I think, more girls. And
Yeah.
teenage girls are even worse. I have
Teenage girls
one of
are
the
complicated.
teenage girls are complicated. Just you wait for book 4 in the series. That's all about teenage girls.
Oh my God, when is it coming out? Tell us now. We need it.
Well, it'll be soon, I hope, because it's the next one to come. I think so. It should be coming soon. So it's number 4,
Yay.
that one.
Yeah, yeah, no. And besides, I'm totally in love with the detective, with Adam. I love him. I want him to be my husband.
Well, I'm afraid there's a queue. There's a queue of people who want to. Yeah, he's nice, isn't he? It was funny, when I wrote this book, I didn't know that I was going to be writing any more about him. I thought it was just the one book. So I didn't create him thinking that he was going to have a long life. I thought he was just going to be in one book.
To the book.
So I was quite lucky, really, that I ended up with a character that people liked. And I deliberately decided to just make him a nice guy, because there are so many detectives who are alcoholics or,
Assholes, generally.
yeah, they had terrible relationships, or, there's so many of them have such sort of terrible personal lives. And I wanted Adam to be different. I mean, obviously he has a tragedy in his life with his son, but that's not his fault. Other than that, he's just a guy who loves his wife, and that doesn't happen a lot in detective fiction.
But you gave him, like, I mean, he really is very likable. I really liked him a lot during all of the series. But you gave him a really complicated story with his little kid. I mean, he was 12 years old, and you opened up the subject about depression and bullying and suicide. And see, this is what I'm telling you, that it's like a really, really, really deep novel, like wrapped up in a thriller, just to get us to talk about subjects that are difficult, but that are really important to talk about. You really you really did great on that end, because there are subjects like motherhood, like you just said a while ago. Motherhood is really hard, and it's really disappointing sometimes, and it's really not fun a lot of the time, and it's very taboo still in this day and age to say so. And saying this and saying, well, she was not fit to be a mother. There was another topic that we talked about Leo, that he was adopted and they didn't care for him. And we were talking about adoption. And then when you have another child that is biologically yours, and if you can still love both of them the same. And it's a hard subject, because it's something that happens like on a day-to-day basis, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, because of the complicated way in which Sharon deals with her motherhood, um, it was always going to be problematic if she had a child of her own, having had an adopted child. And she was also trying to keep Barry by having children, and which is
Yeah.
always a bad thing. You can't keep someone in a
Keep a
relationship
man.
just by having a child. They have to want to be with you as well as the child.
And
So it was
you're
it was always such
forgetting
a
about
bad decision.
and then you're forgetting about like the idiot factor that Barry is, like the douchebag that Barry is. I mean, maybe you can do it with a nice man like the detective, but not with men like Barry.
No. No, she's made the wrong choice of bloke as well. I mean, she chose the wrong guy, let's face it. But yeah, it's a complicated thing, adoption, I think. I did I listened to there was a radio show on the BBC here about adoption when I was doing the writing, and it was very moving because it was talking about a young couple who were adopting two little children. I think they were aged 2 and 3 at the time, and they come from a very troubled background. Um, and the adopting parents were going through the process to be approved to have these children. But it was very moving because they were being very honest about the issues that they were going to face. That they didn't. At one point, the woman said she was terrified that she wouldn't even like the children.
Wow.
Really, really powerful, honest things. I mean, she wanted to like them, but she understood that this is a different process to having a baby biologically, and these children were coming to them with a backstory already, even though they were very tiny.
Complicated.
Yeah, so that was very moving and made me think very, very deeply about issues around adoption, and the way in which that can go wrong. And it doesn't always go well. Sometimes it does, most of the time it does, but sometimes it doesn't. And again, this is a sort of story where you can look at that. You can see the almost catastrophic consequences for Leo of the fact that this didn't go well. And I think by the end we think he's going to be okay
Yeah.
because he's come through and he's out the other side, and I think he's going to be okay, Leo. But it was a close run thing, and he was not having a good time during the course of the book. He was in real pain, and it's back to what you were saying about the issues and his depression. He was self-harming, and how Adam had seen that before in his own son. And when I wrote this book, it was 2016 when I wrote it. And back then, the idea of childhood depression and especially childhood suicide, very young children like Jake, was very unusual, very rare.
Yeah.
And it does happen, but it was very rare. But now, after the pandemic, both of those things are much more of a problem. So the book almost is looking at something of course, I didn't know, but it's looking at something that's become more of a problem and more common now, which is really sad, than it was at the time the book was written. So I suppose that again, it gives you an opportunity to look at these bigger issues and try and understand them emotionally.
Wow. But it's incredible that it's a difficult subject. And I think it will be a difficult subject always because we don't want to believe that children can self-harm and can get depressed enough to want to kill themselves. But you putting it out there and starting a conversation, I think it's like really important. And it helps like to open up and talk about like a lot of things that happen. We talked about here, not specifically about kids self-harming, but about there were two complicated stories about adoption of people here in the book club, not regarding them, but regarding family members, but with children, like with the background that you said, that wanted to give the children back. And we were like, I mean, imagine for the kids. I can understand that as adults, you're like overwhelmed, but you're overwhelmed with kids that are biologically yours also. But if you're not prepared, I mean, you're only going to harm children, and it's really sad that those things happen. And I'm really glad that you put it in the book because it started a conversation here about we should all know our limits. We should all know,
Yes.
like, right? Because I
Yeah.
was like, my husband has always wanted to adopt another kid besides our two, and I'm like, I'm sorry, but I can't. I won't. I know myself. I won't love that kid the way they deserve. I mean, no. And he's always been telling me like, super selfish, and we can give more. And I'm like, I can't. And I always felt bad about that. But when we talked about it here, I was like, okay, maybe yes, selfish, but at least I know myself to say I can't do it. And that's what your book does.
I think you're absolutely right. But there's no point in taking something on that unless you can do it 100%. Anything to do with children, it has to be 100%. And if you can't do that, then you're better off not doing it at all, because the child in the long run will not thank you, and will not have the life that they could have had with someone else maybe. And also it damages you too. I mean, everyone comes out damaged. It's not a good thing. But it is still quite taboo. We are supposed to think that anyone can be a parent. But it's not true. Not everyone is good at it. Some people are really bad at it, and we just need to be prepared to say that.
I know. And well, there was like more talk about the subject with going back to your best friend Barry. We talked about how he totally was an asshole, but he was a good dad to Daisy. Maybe not so much to Leo, but he was a good dad to Daisy. He was an even better parent than Sharon, I think. And it got like overshadowed with all his personal things that it's normal. I mean, we mix up everything we know about a person like we do with famous people, and then they're like judged in everything they do. But with Barry, it was complicated because it was like, he is a good parent to Daisy. He loved her. When we thought he was molesting her, we hated him, but then we saw that it wasn't. That it was just, he really, really loved her, and he defended her in front of Sharon. But it speaks about how when something like this subject on child porn, that it's something like everyone hates, he got mixed up in that it was not even true, but that then we can't even separate that from the person in his other aspects. So that was another thing that was like, we always judge without knowing the background. Was that something you wanted us also? I'm sorry.
Yes, absolutely. And particularly in relation to social media as well. Again, I wrote this back in 2016, and a lot has changed in that time in terms of we've got new things like TikTok, which didn't exist back then. And Twitter was quite different then. It was still quite new. But all the same, I was really aware of it, and wanted to explore the dark side of it. Particularly when it comes to things like a missing child. And we've all seen it. When a child goes missing in real life, the first thing that happens is that social media goes crazy. And everyone's looking at the story, everyone's looking at it on the news and commenting. And as soon as there's any sort of footage of the parents, say the parents go on TV and ask to the child to be brought home, or asking for information, everyone's judging the parents straight away, and normally very negatively. You hardly ever see positive stuff. They're immediately jumping to conclusions about the family and seeing them as suspects. And I wanted to look at that and how that plays out in real life. And back in 2016, people were quite naive about social media, I think, and thought they could say anything they wanted on Twitter, and it had no consequences. That it was like a free space to say whatever you like about someone you don't know, and a situation you don't understand. So I wanted to look at that very much and say, no, this is dangerous. This is very dangerous, and it isn't like a sealed unit. Social media, it leaks into real life. So that's why I did the whole storyline with the fire and the vigilantes turning up at the house, because I wanted to make it clear that things people say on social media have real consequences, and are genuinely harmful. And I think perhaps most people are more aware of that now, but there are still people out there who write terrible things on social media and seem to think it's okay to do that. And it's really not. It really, really isn't.
But I think you're being overly positive about things, saying that things have changed. I think it's gotten worse. I mean, things say horrible things in social media because they think there are no consequences, and it's really easy to say things behind a screen. We really, really love that part of the book where you write like the comments, because it gives a feeling of being there, of being part of the story, and understanding that this is the life, we're living now. Everything is under a microscope. Whatever little thing you do can be blown out of proportion because some random person behind a computer fixates on that, right? So, I mean, I know I've been repeating and repeating myself saying that you wrote a really deep book disguised as a thriller, but I mean, we had not even touched the subject on social media, and I think it's like one of the main subjects there because it is a problem, and it makes us, do you think like we're less empathetic as a society, as a humanity as a whole because of social media?
I think there are good things about it, and I think there are terrible things about it. The good things are we can relate to people on the other side of the world. We can make friends. We can learn from other people. I've made some good friends on Twitter, for example, that I now know in real life. So it can be a wonderful thing, but it can also be absolutely terrible because of all the things that you've been saying. You can say whatever you like. You don't have to. We would never dream of saying the things to a person's face that we seem to be happy with saying online. So we've lost all our sense of humanity because we don't behave like proper human beings, a lot of us, when we're online, because we have this filter, we have this artificial window which is called a computer screen, and we think we can say what we like, that the other person in somehow isn't going to be affected by it. No, it's like a shiny new toy that we've got as a species, and we don't yet have rules and conventions around how we use it. And we know when we're in a room with someone having a conversation, we know how to behave. We know there are certain things you do and certain things you don't do, but we haven't really got that far on social media yet. Well, some people have, but there's still a lot of hate out there, and it gets magnified because it's on social media. And then it starts turning into a whole movement, and you get these communities of hate, and we're seeing that now about all sorts of different issues around the world. And that's so dangerous because a small number of people can generate far too much noise, far too much aggression, and if we didn't have social media, that wouldn't happen. It didn't used to happen in the old days. There were always people who were angry and loud, but they couldn't get their voices heard beyond a very small number of people, whereas now anyone can hear you. And we just haven't worked out how to deal with it. We haven't worked out how to modulate it.
Wow. It's really, really deep what you just said, that we don't behave like proper human beings online. I wrote it down because it's like mind-blowing, because it's true. We don't behave like human beings because we say things that we wouldn't ever say in front of a person to their face. So you're a deep storyteller disguised as a thriller writer, but you're not. I think you should explore other avenues, Cara.
That's very nice of you.
But what you're saying is true, and it's like doubly worrying because the next generations are glued to their screens, and if we as adults don't know how to behave, how can we teach other generations, other people, kids that grew up with screens, like from day one? How can we teach them when we as adults don't behave? It's a real complicated and social dilemma.
It is. I don't know if you have the same where you are, but we have a real issue now around particularly young boys watching pornography on screen, on the internet, and they think that this is how you conduct a relationship. They have no idea that this is a sort of dangerous and aggressive and non-consensual type of sex. So there's these terrible stories of young boys
Yes.
asking young girls to do certain things which are straight from pornography. They're not normal. They're horrific, and violent, and imposing an aggression on the young girl. But the guy doesn't know any better. He's not doing it because he's evil. He's doing it because he's seen it on the screen and he thinks that's how it's done.
Normal. Yeah.
Really terrifying. We are normalizing violent sexual behavior just because that's what young guys see. And I find that terrifying. I really do.
It is, and the problem is not just with the boys, Cara. The girls also watch porn, and they think it's normal. So when boys ask a girl to do things, they've seen it on TV and they think it's normal, and not just porn. I mean, like
Yeah, so
mainstream.
they don't think they can say no because they think
Uh-huh.
it's normal. And I think that's terrible.
It's terrifying, terrible. It's dehumanizing, but it happens, and not just because they're watching porn. I mean, a lot of like teenager directed TV series are directed at like, I don't know. I mean, I watch things, I'm very open-minded, and sometimes I watch things that my kids, like my 15-year-old kids wants to see, and I'm like, oh my God, is this happening in the real world? I cannot believe this. And they think it's normal, and they think a lot of things. I mean, not just with sexual behavior, but with drug abuse and like behavior. I mean, it's very complicated because, as you say, we have more access to information, but that access, untethered and feathered, does not make it does not make us responsible.
Yeah, you're right.
Complicated. Should we take the picture, Moni, before people start to leave, Cara, because it's becoming like midday here and people are going to start to leave? Is it okay if we take a picture?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, guys, take out your books. Moni is going to take the picture.
Oh wow,
Yes.
I love it. Oh, this is fantastic.
Talking about like things in screens, we're basically all of us reading it on tablets.
Oh well, that's okay. I don't mind. Oh, this is really lovely. I didn't know you did this. This is lovely.
Yes, we take pictures. I'll send it to you in a little while. Moni
Oh,
takes
that's really
fantastic
kind. I
pictures.
love it. I love it.
There are 3 screens, so be patient.
Yes.
Okay.
Cindy,
Yeah, I'll
voltea.
be patient.
Moni, voltea. ¿Quién no está volteando? Ale, ahí estás. Muy bien. Maca, con tu libro, aunque sea de mentiras.
Ahí voy, número 1. Ay, espérenme. Ay, espérenme un segundito. Number 1. Screen number 2. And screen number 3. Okay, let's take another one. So everybody looks at the camera. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Moni. And Cara, did you see the Spanish version? Did you see what it's called?
I did. Yes, the title is different, obviously. So
Super different. When I read
Yeah.
it, I was looking for it and I was like, no. I mean, it's not translated, and a lot of people read in Spanish. And then someone said, yeah, it just has a totally different title. And
I know,
we found it.
and that's fine. I don't mind. I mean, sometimes things work in different languages, and there's a double meaning in the English title, which is hard to do in another language because other languages don't have the same sort of phrases. So it's absolutely fine. I mean, I always love seeing the covers that come from a different
covers.
country. Yeah, I just love that because I see so many different designs, and they're so reflective of their communities. So the one from Brazil, for example, is just fantastic. It's got color and energy, and it's just really sort of different looking, whereas the English one's much more, the English one's
Subdued. But it
just,
is, I
we're much
love,
more reserved.
but I love, like, for you, I mean, for you as an author, it must be amazing to see like the different kinds of covers and your novel being published in different. I hope you have a copy of every single translation.
I nearly do, but it's really hard because people don't always send them. So we have to nag them and ask for them. I think I've got most of them, but I haven't got all of them. But I try and collect them. So I have a shelf upstairs, which is like my vanity shelf.
Of course.
So, which is nice. I'm running out of space now. So that's a good thing.
That's a very good thing. You should buy another vanity bookshelf because we want
I
to keep
think you're
reading your
right.
books. Okay, guys, if someone wants to, I'm just gonna ask the last question, but if you guys want to go, yeah, putting up your hands. Cara, just the last question, and it's like
Sure,
the
yeah,
same one we
sure, no
always
problem.
ask. Thank you. The one we always ask our authors, what are you reading right now, and like your favorite book? We always get ideas from you guys.
Okay. What am I reading right now? I'm not reading all that much because I'm trying to write, and it's often quite
Good.
difficult to read another book when you're writing one yourself. And if the book's really good, that just makes the problem even worse. because if the other book has a strong voice, I'm sure you understand what I mean by that.
Yeah.
If the voice of the book is really strong, then it gets into your head and it's like radio signals, and you start losing the voice of your own book. So normally what I do when I'm writing is I read non-fiction. So I don't read novels. I read history or biography or something. So I've been reading a few non-fiction books recently, but I'm going on holiday this week, so I've got some crime books to take with me. So I shall be reading crime books on holiday, which I always enjoy when I'm on the
That's
beach.
that's a good idea.
And in terms of my favorite book, I suppose my favorite book is a book that everyone knows about, and which I read first when I was 12 years old, and it's The Lord of the Rings.
Oh,
So
yes.
I read that when I was 12, and I got my love of language from that book. And that book taught me that there are amazing things that you could do with words. You could create a whole world of words, just of words, and you could make pictures in people's heads. And I loved that, and I still love it. And it's just very close to my heart.
But how amazing that you discovered your love of books and this, like, the love of language that you said, and this is what you do for a living. How amazing that
I know.
you transmit that to a lot of people. How
Oh, well, thank
incredible.
you. Thank you. That's really, really nice of you.
Thank you, Cara. Mariana,
Hey, Cara. Nice
Hey,
meeting
Mariana.
you.
Nice to meet you.
Um, with your book, you walk us through a history of family and community universal issues, like are valid everywhere in the world. And I think you ignited our judgmental selves with those stories because we were judging each and every character, and then we felt bad about it. Was that your intention? Was that your objective? And what kind of message you wanted that to resonate in all of us after experiencing that judgmental self?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, because I think I did want people to keep questioning what they were seeing and reading, so that it is like life, isn't it? When you meet someone, sometimes your first impression turns out to be wrong, and you either find yourself liking them more or liking them less, because when you actually see them behaving or you find out more about their backstory, then your opinion changes. And I think fiction can do that. Fiction of all kinds can take you on that imaginative journey, that emotional journey of finding out more about a person, and then having your judgment change and the way you see them change. So I think yes, it was deliberate. It's also, I suppose, it's part of the fun of a thriller that usually happens, that people are usually not what they seem in thrillers, and so that is almost part of what people expect. But I tried to do it in a way that's perhaps a bit more thoughtful, so it's not just it's not too superficial, that there's a bit more to it. But you know, other people do that very well as well, not just me.
Thank you. I enjoyed your book very, very much.
Thank you, Marianne.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cara. Maka?
Hi, Cara. First of all, thank you very much for meeting us. I really enjoyed your book. I'm not a thriller reader, but this had me procrastinating because, you know, I just wanted to sit and read and read and read.
Lovely.
And many things happened to me while I was reading your book. At the same time, I was having this sort of conversation with myself. Um, First of all, I wanted to know how much was that specific scene of Barry and Sharon talking to the news, to the media, influenced by your perception of what happened to the McCanns?
That's a really good question as well. It was very much influenced by that. I know it's a long time ago now, but it's such a famous case, and those poor people have been so, well, that the abuse that they've had online has been horrific. And in fact, there was no Twitter when it happened. No, it didn't really exist at all. I can only imagine how much worse it would have been if there'd been more social media at the time that it happened, the time that Madeline disappeared. But I did go back and do some research. I looked at how people had reacted to the McCanns on Twitter, the things that people were saying about them, and I was horrified, absolutely horrified. These poor people have had the worst thing happen to them that could possibly happen to a parent, and yet it's being made so much worse by the way that, you know, the treatment they're getting, and the abuse that they're getting online. So yes, I did want to look at that, and I did want to dramatize the process of people making judgments based on no information, and realizing that we do that, humans do that, but it's so much worse now we have social media, because we're so distant from these people. We have no ability to find out
Right.
what they're really like. We don't know them, but instead of saying to ourselves, we don't know them, we can't have a judgment, we have a judgment anyway. And
Yeah.
that's so dangerous. And I did want to look at that. So that's a really good observation, that, and I didn't talk about it specifically in the book, but it definitely was one of the things that fed into the way that I did the book.
Okay, thank you very much for that. But I have another question, or two actually. One is, what was the inspiration for Sharon? Because you had a very, despite you know feeling for her at the end of the book, your depiction of her is really, really mean at some point. You know, um, her painted shoes, her painted Louboutins, and the fact that she's always worrying about how she looks and whatnot. You know, one thing is the story that you're going to develop, but I would tend to think that you, as a creator, have somebody in mind when you're doing that. Did you have an
Yes,
inspiration from
I
people you
sort of
know?
did. Yeah, I sort of did. Somebody I know very well. So yes, I mean, some of the things that might look a bit extreme in Sharon are things that I've actually observed in somebody else.
We want a
So the
picture, Cara.
yeah,
We want to know where she is.
oh no, my my lips are sealed. I might get prosecuted.
And the
But
last question I have is, yes, you said that you had begun this book by the end in a way, but it's such
yes,
a twisted twist, you know?
yes.
So how did you come up with that? I mean, what on earth pushed you to thinking that sort of a prep school teacher is going to do something like this, despite, I mean, setting aside the idea of this very manipulative child, but the picture of this teacher.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I started with the twist, but I didn't have the idea of a teacher straight away. But I did see that if the missing child was going to manipulate somebody into conspiring with her, then it had to be someone who knew her very well. And it had to be somebody who she could have so much contact with that she could give all of the aspects of this made up story about her terrible home.
Okay,
She would have to have the person would have to be someone who would believe it. And as it turns out, Kate has lost a child herself. We don't know
Right.
that until the very end, but so she's really vulnerable in a way psychologically
So
to
your take on
this
that is
child.
that Daisy manipulated Kate, not that Kate manipulated Daisy, because I
Yeah.
understood it the other way around in a way.
Well, it is a bit of both, I think, but
Uh-huh.
I think it starts with Daisy. Daisy wants this to happen,
This
and
is so
Daisy
clever.
spends the time giving all this information that's most of it is lies to Kate. And once she's found out, she must find out at some point, we don't see this. She must find out that Kate had a daughter that died. And having found that out, she would know that she was particularly useful to her. She would be a very good person to try to manipulate because she would have this emotional vulnerability. So yes, I mean it started out with it would be a child that manipulating someone, but I didn't know who it was going to be. And then of course you have the real challenge, which is you have to have the teacher present in the story
Right.
so that the reader doesn't feel cheated at the end. But you also can't have so much of her that she becomes obvious. So it's a real challenge that you got to, and someone like Agatha Christie does this so well that, you have all of your suspects on screen or on the page right from the start. But, she manages to hide the person really well. And that was such a challenge for me that I had to have the teacher present enough, but not too much. And so by the end, it still had to be a surprise.
Thank you very much. Just let me tell you that here in Chile, you not only have me as a fan, because I bought the book for my mum, my sister, and my sister-in-law. They love
Thank
thrillers,
you.
and they went crazy. So they asked for the next books for Christmas. So
Fantastic.
we've all become
That's
fans.
so nice.
Thank
Thank you so much. That's really, really appreciated.
But it's really just before Moni, I voy. But just before like the last comment, it's really impressive what you are saying because it gives a new depth to the book when we talk with you with authors, because there are things like we didn't even know, or that we imagined something like I had imagined what Maca said, that Kate manipulated Daisy, and seeing that it was backwards, it makes more sense, but we didn't see it that way. So it's really enriching for us as readers to talk with you guys, and we're really, really appreciative of you guys when you take time to do this with the fans.
Well, I love doing it. I love talking to readers. It's the best thing. I mean, it's the best thing about this job that you get to talk to people, the other side of the world. I mean, how wonderful is that?
It is. That's one of the perks of social media.
Yeah, exactly.
And just one more thing, Moni Rucos. I voy, Moni. Moni Rucos, the one that took the picture, she was the one who discovered your books and put them on to me. So we all owe this to her.
Thank you, Monica.
She's really big fan.
Thank you.
All
thank
the
you so
three
much.
books are fantastic, and I'm looking forward for the fourth.
Thank you.
Last one, Cara. Moni, Ibarra, ahora sí. Perdón.
Don't worry. Hello, Cara, and thank you very much for having this call with us. And maybe this is a very silly question, but what with the mice? I don't know. Do you have a phobia with mice, or where did that idea came from? I mean, it was really disgusting just to think about having all the mice in the same place, but was it just like to add more color about the already twisted mind of Noel? Was the intention is to have them as pet to make company to, or what was the
No,
point?
Moni, te estás
Mice.
equivocando del libro, güey.
Why?
Este es el de, she's talking
Ah.
about another book.
Oh, I thought you meant the mice in the
Sorry,
museum.
sorry.
When the children go to the museum, there are mice that are hidden.
Ajá.
And that's actually true. If you go to this museum, it's a real museum in Oxford. And if you go there, one of the things they do for the kids is they say there are 6 mice in the
Find them.
wooden mice, not real ones, wooden mice. You can go and find them like a treasure trail. So yeah, that's real actually. So there are mice. It's just only briefly.
We need to take a field trip there to Oxford.
I think you'd like it. It's a very special town.
I think we would, all of us together. Yeah, Cara, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. It was really, really fun. It was very enriching. You gave a new depth to the book that we didn't have. We loved it, but you gave us like a whole new perspective on it. We can't wait for your 4th book. We're all super fans, and thank you
Well,
so
let
much.
me know. We can talk about the 4th one if you like. We can do the whole
Yes.
teenage girl thing.
That was just what I was going to tell you. When the 4th comes out, we need another Zoom.
No problem.
Thank you so much. Have a great night. And know
Lovely
that you
to
have
talk to you
fans.
all. Thank you all. Thank you very much from me.
Thank
It's really
Cara.
lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Bye bye. Voy a tener el video. Ya se salió. Ya. ¿Dónde está Moni Barra? Ya se fue. Yo decía, ¿de qué
Se fue de la vergüenza.
Sí, claro, güey.
Se
Qué
desconectó.
risa, qué risa, qué risa.
Está
Güey,
en
yo
el
decía-
WhatsApp.
Yo decía, ¿de qué está hablando? Con madre.
A ver, nada
Oye,
más quiero
pero
saber,
sí.
era un libro de ella, del que
Pregunto.
estaba hablando.
No,
Ay,
pero
no.
está hablando de lo que estamos discutiendo ahorita, güey.
Es que sí, estuvieron muy juntos y los dos fueron de un thriller, entonces
No.
sí, uno se confunde.
Está en el
Con
WhatsApp
madre.
y dice que pasará la historia. Está en el WhatsApp toda
Risa,
pelada.
risa.
Y
Oye,
dando
y
el
ella
avión
tan
cuando ella
educada,
dijo,
la
el
salvó,
ratón.
dice, no, sí, yo pensaba en las ratas que estaban en el museo.
Qué linda, güey.
Pero sí, muy bien de Cara. Lo
Muy
manejó
educada.
Muy padre,
Like a lady,
muy padre,
like a
sí.
lady.
Lo tomó
Sí,
bien,
sí.
lo
muy
tomó
bien.
bien, güey.
Sí.
A mí me dio muy buena
vaciado
impresión,
estuvo
mucho
eso.
mejor,
O sea-
mucho mejor impresión de la que esperaba, muy inteligente.
Me
Sí,
encantó.
me cayó bien, fíjate.
Me
Sí.
encantó su idea, o sea, como que una visión bien
Oye.
distinta, como que te dan ganas de releerlo, ¿no?
Claro.
Sí.
Pero además, todos estos conceptos de familia que empezó a explicar se me hacen tan importantes que los escritores empiecen a manejarlos. O sea, yo no había visto a Sharon desde esa perspectiva. O sea, pues sí, hay mujeres que no despiertan ese instinto maternal y está bien, ¿no? O sea,
Claro.
pero sí estuvo oye, qué buenos conceptos maneja ella y qué buen consejo de releer el libro, porque yo eso de
Ni
que
lo había
ya venían
pescado.
pistas, nunca jamás, ¿eh?
No. Y me encantó que dijera que la Sharon está basada en una persona que conoce, está con madre también eso.
Oye, mientras no sea su mamá.
Ya sé, güey.
Oye, yo le hubiera dicho, nombres, queremos nombres.
Güey, sí, pero
No,
no
nomás
quiso
me
decir.
dice la persona.
Nora le pidió fotos, se puso peor,
Ajá.
porque
Sí,
el
qué
nombre
foto, pero
como
dijo que
quiera.
no.
Oye, como siempre nos sucede con todos los Zooms de autores, salimos más encantados y con ganas de releer el libro y de como que o sea, lo ves con otros ojos, no hay
De
de
leer
otra.
los siguientes,
El libro lo ves con
güey.
otros ojos.
Sí, de
Y hasta
leer los
libros que no nos han
siguientes.
gustado mucho. Y este que además si nos gustó, pues más peor.
Sí, sí me cayó bien a mí también.
¿Cómo,
Y de volverlos
cómo
a
le
leer.
sientes la buena energía a las personas, ¿no? O sea, ella
De leer.
súper
Lo siguiente sí es
relajada.
el mismo. O sea, como que volverlo a leer, no sé.
Sí, te digo, a mí me
Ya,
encantó ella porque muy relajada, muy educadísima para contestar, se veía que estaba de buen
chida.
humor, ajá, o sea, me
Oigan,
No
súper encantó.
cagándola.
Ya regresó
somos muy,
Moni.
pero, somos muy
Te amo,
Moni,
fáciles.
te amo, güey.
te amo, Moni.
Nunca nunca, o sea, yo siempre he
Priceless,
pensado que eres tu
priceless.
libro. Siempre he pensado que eres, jamás me, o sea,
Te amo,
siempre
güey.
Quedará para la
decía,
posteridad, Moni.
Yo
uy, qué
decía, ¿de qué
oso,
chingados
man.
está hablando, güey? Y luego,
Ay,
es que
no,
me
qué bueno
dijiste
que me
mal,
callaste la
pendeja.
boca. Oye, pero
Y yo,
¿sabes qué? Estaba
pero eran
destinado a ser
hamsters, por eso yo no
así.
le pesqué, güey. O sea, en este libro son
Ah,
hamsters y yo
si no me
decía,
hubieras
¿de
callado
qué
desde
está
el inicio,
hablando?
si no me hubieras callado. No, jamás pensé que o sea, así tenía que ser, porque de hecho no me iba a conectar, me conecté bien tarde, o sea, no me hubiera conectado, la verdad.
Ay, güey, no
Oye,
mames.
Ay, no
y
pasa
me,
nada,
y,
no pasa
No
y me
nada.
pasa
encantó la
nada.
introducción, me encantó la introducción de Moni cuando iba a hacer la pregunta y que dijo, a lo mejor mi pregunta es muy boba.
Pues no, deja tu boba, fuera de lugar.
Con madre, güey. Con madre. Nunca se le va a
Oye,
olvidar
pero,
este Zoom.
pero hasta esa la contestó divinamente educada, o sea,
Sí, o sea,
no,
que
no,
pues mira, ya la cagó esta niña, pues acá, aquí
pero
Qué
había
linda, qué
ratones.
linda.
pero padre su intención de no hacerte sentir mal, Moni. O sea, sí dijo, ah, bueno, yo pensé que me iba a preguntar por mis ratones, que también salen, ¿no? Y sí, yo también pensé que estabas hablando de esos hasta que dijiste Noel. Ahí me di cuenta de que, porque todavía
Yo,
ratones y todos juntos, dije, pues está padre como que hablar de algo que no era como lo principal del libro. Y ya cuando dijiste Noel, dije, oh, la madre.
Sí,
todo, güey, sí, pero, ay, ya, Moni, no pasa nada, güey. Nadie, o sea,
Todas te
No,
amamos,
sí,
Moni, todas te amamos.
que no, no, se me va a
Sí.
quitar, se me va a pasar hasta mañana. Hoy sí voy a
En
estar.
algún momento yo
con
también
madre.
estaba como tú. ¿De cuál estamos hablando?
¿Cuál?
¿Cuál es primero? ¿Cuál es después?
Es
Estuvieron
que,
muy
güey,
juntos.
nunca los ponemos después de leer, o sea, siempre es inmediatamente después. Yo también ayer le di otra como releída y a las preguntas porque dije, güey, me voy a confundir. Porque
Yo
sí, siempre es
Es,
despuesito.
exacto, por eso siempre había traído esto en la cabeza de que, ay, sí, con razón terminarlo, y lo tengo que terminar, porque ni me voy a hablar con ella sin haberlo.
Sin
O sea,
acabarlo.
siempre
Y
pensé
aparte
que era
como que
esta.
temas pareciditos, o sea, muy diferentes los
Sí.
libros, pero la niña
La niña, sí,
desaparecida,
no,
pues
sí.
sí. A
Con
cualquiera,
madre.
Moni, nos pasa. Don't worry, be happy.
Oye, pues bueno, muy bien con la monita esta. Qué bueno que se conectaron, gracias.
Oye, yo
Y
les quiero preguntar,
¿qué?
¿quién cambié, como siempre me pasa, cambié mi calificación del libro después del Zoom? Ya es que te dije que el final a mí se me había hecho como
No,
que,
muy
¿esto qué?
malo.
Me cambió, ya que dijo esta niña, dijo Daisy, murió en un ferry, alguien más, alguna cosa, o sea, o apenas releer el libro, eso me cambió, porque de la nada sí me quedé como que de la nada, pero ya que me dijo, hubo cositas que sí
Ajá,
iba, dije, ya me cambia, no se lo sacó de la
claro.
nada, o sea, sí lo fue metiendo, pero no nos dimos cuenta, si alguien
No
se
nos
acuerda de
dimos
más
cuenta.
cosas, nos dice
El
para
celular,
saber.
Güey, yo ese ni
el
lo pesqué
celular,
hasta que
el
lo dijo.
celular que tenía la niña, que le
¿El
decía
celular
Ay,
qué?
que tenía la niña, que decía, aquí que te estoy viendo, te ves muy linda, y no sé qué, cuando estaban un día en un columpio o algo así, y era así como de, no fue el hermano, no fue,
más bien
¿quién le
era
está
como los
mandando
mensajes
mensajes?
de la gente, ¿no? Que decía de que la había visto en un ferry, que la había visto pelirroja, y no sé qué.
Ajá, pero el celular todavía la niña estaba en su casa, y le decía,
Ajá.
siempre le mandó
cuando
un
se estaba
mensaje que decía, siempre
columpiando.
te estoy viendo, te ves
Sí,
muy linda, o algo así. Y
y yo
decía, ¿quién?
pensé que era el hermano, el hermano grande.
Sí, pero como
claro,
ya
eso
se
te
habían
hacen
peleado con él,
pensar.
era como no fue el hermano, porque se habían peleado por lo del circo y eso.
Ajá.
Entonces fue así como
Sí, o
de,
sea, sí.
claro, porque yo decía, ¿con quién diantres
¿Con
está
quién habla?
mensajando? Ajá, era la maestra.
Sí.
Siempre la estaba
Pero
viendo.
qué tétrico, yo lo encontré espantoso
Sí.
eso.
Está horrible. Sí, ya me dieron ganas, yo la verdad es que nada más leí pero ya me dieron ganas de leer los otros. Ya los voy a comprar. Aparte, y siempre que platicamos con autores, quiero ir a comprar todos sus libros como para apoyarlos, güey. Entonces,
Sí, sí.
los voy a ir a comprar todos, toditos, así como Maca, güey, para regalarlos a todo el mundo.
Yo los encargué porque tanto exageré con el tema, porque les iba contando, es que no puede ser, porque yo nunca leo thrillers y ellas tres comparten sus libros y siempre los leen y yo estoy como fuera. Y ahora les dije, tienen que leerlo y les encantó, les
Sí,
encantó.
está bueno.
Sí.
Qué bueno, qué
Yo
bueno que
ayer
les
quería
gustó.
decir que a mí me gustó mucho más este libro. Tú le hiciste mucho rollo, Nora, de que está bruto, mi favorito, mi thriller,
El de Lisa Jewell.
Ajá, pero este me gustó mucho más.
Más, neta.
Fíjense, pero sí.
Ay, no, a mí el de Lisa Jewell me encantó también.
A mí el de
Lo acabo de
Lisa Jewell me
terminar
gusta más.
porque desubicado yo pensaba que íbamos a hablar de ese ahora. Pero realmente lo encontré bueno también.
Yo también
Sí,
pensé.
sí está bueno. Sí está bueno porque tiene muchos temas, pero a mí el de Lisa Jewell sí me gusta mucho más. Pero ven, eso es
Oye,
lo padre de
Yo
discutirlos,
también.
güey.
Oye,
Oigan,
es
bueno,
que los dos
hablando
están así
de...
súper afables, se llevan bien rápido, te los lees, te tienen intrigada, pero es que no sé, a mí el de Lisa Jewell me dejó así como que, oh, ese sentimiento de que no mames.
Pues incómodo, güey.
O sea,
Eso
sí,
es.
como que no mames, o sea, no mames.
yo lo
O
encontré
sea, el
terrorífico.
otro, el de Cara te deja, what the fuck, o sea, niña diabólica. Pero el otro es así como que, como
A mí lo único que me
triste.
faltó en el de Lisa Jewell es que hubiera sido el esperma de Tío, porque era demasiado loca la mujer.
Bueno, sí pensaban que era de tío aquí, pero no era. ¿Qué onda,
Dijo
Ceci?
que había buscado a alguien que se pareciera.
Ah, claro, sí.
Sí, dijo.
Sí.
Llegaste tarde, Cecilia.
Muy tarde, y ayer no me conecté y yo quería comentar, pero pues mira,
Güey, buenísima, pero lindísima la autora, güey.
ya me imagino, si me choca eso, yo también igual que Moni, soy Godín, mírame. Oigan, yo quería comentar eso de que a mí el de Lisa me pareció...
Platica.
¿Qué? No hagas, llévate un frasquito. No, de que de Lisa Jewell me pareció morboso, porque desde el principio, morbosa yo, desde el principio sabías, como todo buen thriller, que hay una tragedia, que hay algo, pero ¿sabes quién fue? O sea, desde el principio se ve que la maestra está involucrada, ¿no? ¿Cómo se llama?
Noel.
Noel.
Sabes que Noel tiene que ver, ¿no? Y al final de cuentas como que ya sabes todo lo que va a pasar, pero lo sigues leyendo para saber cómo sucedió. Entonces, eso me parece como eso, muy morboso. Y al final ella dice que es un libro extraño, ¿no? Que no sabía bien y que luego sus editoras le ayudaron como a rearmarlo, y eso me pareció a mí también como un libro extraño. El otro, el de Daisy, el de Cara Hunter, me gustó más porque me tuvo más intrigada, porque ahí sí no sabía quién había sido, ¿no? Y no sabía, como que lo sentí como más intriga, como con mayor misterio, como mayor interés de saber qué pasó. Y en este de Elisa me sucede, me parece eso, como que dentro de mí estaba yo morboseando, como de esas noticias que luego ves en el periódico y que ya sabes qué pasó y todo, pero dices, a ver, pero ¿cómo sucedió? ¿No?
Pero sí, ¿no te pasó que en algún minuto, porque por lo menos en el de Lisa Jewell a mí me pasó que en un minuto yo tuve el terror de que Floyd la tuviera como pareja a la niñita, a Poppy, porque era como tan loca la niñita en algunas, digamos, la idea, que en un minuto dije, este gallo está de acuerdo con Noel y esto es algo más oscuro aún, ¿cachai?
¿Sabes? A mí me pasó eso y luego me pasó, sí lo pensé y también me pareció un poco, también sospechaba que en algún momento él sí supiera y él hubiera concebido a Poppy, ¿no? Con Ellie. Y al final me lo muestran como, o sea, cuando él se suicida, como apartándose y como dándole esa carta al que le escribe, ¿no? ¿Cómo se llamaba la mamá? ¿La abuela? ¿Laurel?
Laurel, sí.
Laurel. Ella, no sé, me parece como ya una persona muy diferente al que dibujaron durante la novela, porque durante la novela lo dibujan un poco bastante maquiavélico, porque él hizo todo un personaje para poderse meter a la vida de Laurel. Él estaba enterado desde el principio cómo era todo, ¿no? Él se volvió en sus miserias humanas rescatándose en Poppy. Él era su luz y su parte humana. Y al final termina siendo como muy correcto, aunque termina suicidando, y no estoy diciendo que el suicidio es